You know, it's actually kind of interesting when you look at the Herpa Wings model portfolio. There are many airlines that have been heavily featured over the years, but the two airlines that probably have been featured the most since the very early days would be Lufthansa and Air France. With Lufthansa nowadays, however, it gets more and more complicated finding any standard livery aircraft models because Herpa just keeps on releasing special livery aircraft models. With Air France, however, it is quite the opposite. Here we are getting one standard livery after the other, so when we find an Air France model with a slight modification to the livery, it actually gets a little bit exciting. And with that, hello and welcome to a new episode of Review, where we today will take a closer look at a Boeing 777-300ER of Air France. At the front of the box we have a cutout so we can get a glimpse of the aircraft model inside, and on top of the box we do have the Air France branding. Now, this is not a current release, and that means we actually have a halfway decent box design here, which means we have the Air France branding again, and then we get a little bit of information about the aircraft. We can also see that this is an officially licensed product from Herpa Wings. That's also quite nice. So yeah, not the best box design, but definitely better than what we get today. And here she is, the Boeing 777-300ER in what used to be the standard livery of Air France, with an additional sticker, which we will get into later in the video. Now, Air France has, since this model was released, this is a 2017 release, by the way, from Herpa Wings, they have updated their standard livery, although the changes to the Air France standard livery are really minuscule. I think what they really have changed from this livery to what we see today is the font size of Air France. It has gotten bigger, but apart from that, it is pretty much what we otherwise can see on the Air France fleet. Now, let's find out what this aircraft model can offer collectors, and then we can talk more about the model later in the video. We start off our tour around the aircraft model with a look at the tail section, where we have the Air France branding on the vertical stabilizer incorporated into the thick blue line. We then have the flag of the European Union. On the fuselage we then find the full registration code of the aircraft, and we do of course also find this logo. This was added to the aircraft promoting Paris as a candidate city for the Olympic Games 2024. As we know today, of course, they did succeed with this campaign. But apart from that, the detailing here has been kept to a minimum by Herpa Wings, but we do have a bit of detailing at the very tail of the aircraft in form of the APU exhaust. Now let's move on to the front of the aircraft, where we then across the fuselage find the writing of Air France and their logo as well. As I said, with the latest iteration of this standard livery, they have slightly changed the size, the font size of Air France, but I think apart from that, it is pretty much identical to what we see here. We also have the aircraft type specification printed on. We find the SkyTeam logo as well next to the front cabin door on both sides actually, and we do also have the Air France KLM Group logo printed on here. Unfortunately, back in 2017, Herpa did still not add any static ports or hatches or anything like that to the aircraft models. So yeah, this model follows the standards of Herpa Wings back in the day. This does also mean that the cockpit section simply comprises of the cockpit windows with the metallic edges and the window wipers. That's the extent of detailing we get on this aircraft model. Now, the engine nacelles, they have been kept in all white, just as most of the fuselage, but do have the silver leading edge printed on, as well as the Air France logo. But also here, back in the day, Herpa did not add anything else to their aircraft models, which means, for example, safety markings are missing on this. But the physical detailing is, apart from the known issue with the GE90 engines of Herpa Wings being too squeezed, overall quite nice looking, especially here from the front, where we very nice you can see the engine fan blades. On the fuselage, just above the wings, we then have the emergency exit printed on. That leads us straight to the wings, which you should also take a closer look at. Starting off with the top side, where we have the different flap slats and spoilers carved out very nicely. We have the markings for the emergency exits printed on, as well as this thick black line, which is a visual indication for the pilots as to the outer edges of the main landing gear. On the underside of the wing, we have more nice physical detailing and the full registration code of the aircraft once again. Speaking of the landing gear, that is the standard landing gear that we find on all 777s from Herpa Wings, even to this day. The main landing gear looking fine, the front landing gear not too bad either, but of course printed details here would have been quite lovely. On the belly of the aircraft, apart from the Herpa Wings logo, we don't really have much detailing here, and we do have a hole in the fuselage for a stand that is not included with this aircraft model, but as we don't have any details here to be destroyed, I guess we can live with it. A little bit of detailing we have in form of the ram air intakes, but it's hardly noticeable. Then last but not least, we do also have the doors to the cargo compartments printed on here at the back of the aircraft and also here at the front of the aircraft. So there we have it, the Boeing 777-300ER in the standard livery of Air France with the addition of the Paris candidate city for the Olympic Games 2024 sticker from Herpa Wings and Scale 1 to 500. And what can we say about this aircraft model? Now, I know that it might sometimes come across like I don't like special liveries, but nothing could be further away from the truth. The fact is just that I prefer to have standard livery aircraft models first and then to get special livery aircraft models, because then I can decide whether I want to have one or the other. Because Herpa always takes years to actually deliver a second model once they have released one, and if they then start off with the special livery, they sometimes forget to actually also make the standard livery, and that annoys me. But when I have standard livery aircraft models, as we most definitely have with the 777 of Air France, because this is actually the 004 version of this model, which means there have already been 4 models before that. This is the 5th model in the line, and this is then the first one which has a sticker, so in a sense a special livery. And then I really do not mind. In fact, I welcome it. Because in this case, of course, it gives the model a little bit more of a story, rather if it had just been the plain standard livery. In this case, the candidacy of Paris as a host city for the Olympic Games, and as we know, this campaign was successful as Paris was the host of the Summer Olympics in 2024. And what is also nice and should be mentioned is that I think Herpa has done a good job in replicating this logo onto the aircraft model. And since we are talking about replicating stuff, let's talk about the print quality overall, which is actually quite good. We don't have any smudges. Edges are clean. Now, back then Herpa could suffer from print lines, but of course not nearly as much as we see today, and this model does not have any. It would also have been really difficult to add print lines to this livery. That is not to say that, of course, Herpa did hold massively back in terms of detailing. Now, the model is totally in line with any other 2017 release from Herpa Wings, but of course there should have been so many more details on this aircraft model already back then, and even with the additional details that we have gotten from Herpa Wings since 2021, they are still holding back massively, and we should still get way more details than what we are getting today. But for a model from 2017, it is totally in line with the standards. So overall, really solid print quality. Also, the physical detailing is actually, I think, quite good. I do like the 777 mold of Herpa Wings. I think they have been quite solid with that one for years. The good thing about this not being a current model as well means that we don't have the very flat wings that we see with current day releases. So we don't have the almost 90-degree angle with the wings here, but a more normal angle of attack for the wings here. So that's quite nice as well. Of course, we do have the common issue with all 777s from Herpa Wings using the GE90 engines, that Herpa's engines are just too squeezed. But as I said, this is affecting all models. It's not specific just for this one. Even though I actually do think that the engines kind of look nice, they're just not quite correct. So while this is a pretty standard 2017 release from Herpa Wings, and the Air France delivery, at least for me, is also hardly exciting, the sticker just gives the whole thing a little bit of a backstory and makes it a little bit more interesting, I think. And if you think so too, then you could actually perhaps get this into your collection, because this is actually part of a giveaway that I'm doing right now. If you want to know more about that and find out all the information you need to know in terms of how you can enter the giveaway, which will also include a Herpa Wings tower and Herpa Wings hangar, then follow the first link in the video description down below. From there you will be led to my Instagram post where everything is explained. And with that, we have reached the end of today's episode. If you have enjoyed this video, then feel free to leave a like. If you are new around here, why not hit subscribe? With that, thanks so much for watching. Hope to see you soon again. I'm checking out, and bye.